The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, also known as the Phantom Killer case, is one of the most notorious unsolved murder cases in American history. The murders took place in 1946 in the border town of Texarkana, which straddles the state lines of Texas and Arkansas. It was a time of post-war prosperity and optimism in America. World War II had just ended, and people were eager to move on from the hardships of the war years. Texarkana was a small town with a population of around 30,000 at the time. The murders shocked and frightened residents who had previously felt safe in their tight-knit community. The killer's choice of victims, young couples parked in lovers' lanes, added to the terror by suggesting that no one was safe from attack. The fact that the killer was never caught only heightened public anxiety. Over the course of 3 months, the killer, a serial killer, attacked 8 people, 5 of whom were killed under the cover of darkness, earning him his nickname, the Texarkana Moonlight Murder, later to be known as the Phantom Killer. Despite an intense manhunt involving multiple law enforcement agencies and a number of suspects over the years, the identity of the killer has never been definitively determined. The case has since become a cultural phenomenon, inspiring books, movies, and documentaries that continue to captivate audiences nearly 75 years later. The brutality and randomness of the attacks sent shockwaves through the community, but is it really unsolved? Is it possible that they got their guy? There were several suspects in the Texarkana Moonlight Murders case, but none were ever definitively linked. Some of the most notable include a man named Yul Swinney, who was arrested for burglary shortly after the murders, a man named L.T. Griffith, who was identified as a suspect by some witnesses, but ultimately cleared by police, and a soldier named Charles Virgin, who was seen near one of the crime scenes and had a history of mental illness, but also lacked any concrete evidence linking him to the murders. Other suspects included an escaped convict named Joseph Carmine Spaziano and a veteran named Orville Majors, among others. This is Outline of a Murder, and this is the case of the Phantom Killer. Okay, here we are, our final part 1 and part 2 episodes on the Phantom Killer. We'd like to do introductions, and then we'll do our tasting.
Hi, this is Elena.
I'm Mom.
And I'm Sherry. This is Outline of a Murder. And super excited. I wanted to give a shout out to Lindy and Paige, who said they were going to have a girls' night and margaritas. So in their honor, Sista made us a skinny margarita. So obviously, need to get our little boomerang going too. I'll post.
And it's Lindy and who?
Paige.
Paige. And thank you guys for the toast.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. No,
Got it? Oh.
You know, let me do another one. Let me do another one.
Okay.
Okay, ready, go.
Okay.
All right.
Cheers.
Very good. Cheers.
Now
to
I can
Paige.
taste.
And Lindy.
Yes.
Not bad.
Not
I
bad.
like it.
Not bad at all.
Yeah. That's what I'm
It's
talking
really
about.
good. Yeah, that's delicious.
I like the other one better. Want mine? I
No.
won't use it.
No, it'll go in there.
Well, what I have that I liked better?
The ranch water.
Ranch water.
Kevin's recipe. Of course, everything Kevin makes is just,
I thought
Top
ranch
notch.
water was in cans.
Yeah, the ranch
There
water
are.
was delicious.
yeah, there are.
Okay, so what I want to do is pull up my notes because, all right, so on the Phantom Killer, that was a recommendation or a request from Mom's Hubs. And
Which he was very excited when he found out you were doing it.
yes. And I've got some notes that I took from a killer. So a book.
Killer.
I've never talked to.
Okie dokie.
Well, actually, I have talked to a killer once. The Phantom Killer by James Presley. It's a fabulous book. I may have to refer back to it at times, so I'll just apologize in advance if there's a little bit of a pause. But I wanted to researched the case first, and then in my research, are you all right? Do you need the
No,
Heimlich?
I'm fine, I guess.
Okay.
Oh, don't ask her if she needs a
No,
Heimlich.
because you won't do it.
Because it'll be,
Okay.
are you...
Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, we don't want to get into that.
No,
We'll just move on.
I could
Move
have
on.
died, though.
Anyway,
You could have because you were so damn stubborn.
wouldn't let us rescue you.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're moving on. Moving on.
Their story.
So I read the book because a lot of people say it's unsolved. And it's like the oldest unsolved case that there is. The guy who wrote The Phantom Killer, James Presley, he actually grew up in Texarkana. And his dad, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the newspaper guys. And back in the day that this crime took place, you could just walk all over crime scenes. I mean, they didn't keep police or the public out. The press could just walk all over the place.
When was this? Sorry.
It is, let's see, 1946.
Okay.
Yeah. And also what was shocking is how adult the teenagers were. Like the times, it's very fascinating. Like we've discussed, the teenager idea was a marketing tool for rock and roll. Teenager did not exist.
Okay.
Yeah, previous to Elvis and the Beatles and all that. So it was a marketing campaign to target the young people, and they just somehow the word teenager.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, and
Yeah, stuck.
I guess the grouping.
Yeah, because
Specifically.
it was like you were an adolescent and then you were an adult. You
Yeah.
were working with your parents or you got a job or whatever.
Okay.
So we've got some like young people in serious relationships. And so I just wanted to give you guys, a heads up that's kind of shocking, some of the stuff. But I also was shocked to learn it was solved.
Stephen thinks they knew the killer, but they charged him with something else.
Yeah, and we'll get into all
Yeah.
of that.
So
Because
that's sort of what you think. a
yes,
little bit.
and when I was reading the story, my favorite was instantly the guy that they connected. But there were a couple things like, well, no, it couldn't have been him, or this murder couldn't have been from the same guy. I'm like, no, the MO is the same. It doesn't matter if the weapon is different. This is the same guy. And so there was still a little bit of controversy on that, but I do believe that they solved it. And we'll get into the reasons why they didn't go public with it, which is kind of sad for the families because they never, like they had private conversations, but they never got the justice that they wanted.
Yeah.
Okay, so super excited. It also inspired several movies. The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which, by the way, that is more fiction than
It
fact.
is, but it's Stephen's favorite movie. One of
And
them.
then the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween.
really?
And
Halloween?
Halloween. It sparked Halloween.
Well, that's
yeah.
nothing like that.
I bet Stephen
The
may
mask.
not know
He
that.
probably doesn't know that.
Yeah, I had no idea. The hook that would be left in the car, that was a urban myth. Of the hook that was left, the Lover Lane's killer and stuff. So that was inspired.
Hey, the hook from the bee guy. What was that horror movie? Candyman?
Oh,
I wonder.
it might be.
Go ahead.
It might be, yeah. Also, it's an interesting case because Texarkana, half of it is in Texas, half of it is in Arkansas. And, that's an interesting thing. The people that came to help, the, detectives, all of that stuff.
Oh.
It's in Bowie County, and it's in the Ark-La-Tex region, so Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas region.
That's a big region.
It's 3 hours from Dallas.
Oh.
Yeah,
It's not far.
It's a twin city. The population on the Texas side was 36,000 in 2020, and the city in its Arkansas counterpart from the core of the Texarkana metropolitan area, it has Miller County from Arkansas, Bowie County in Texas. Combined, there's a population of 65,000 in 2020, but if you include all of the area, it's 149,000.
It's a lot of people.
It reminds me, like, I didn't know that Kansas City there was a Missouri and a Kansas till I was on the road with Dad. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? I thought we were in Missouri. We were. But we're in the same town. But we're in Kansas now. Yep.
It's strange how that works.
Now, the year is 1946. World War II had just ended September 2nd of 1945. So, a lot of the young guys were back from fighting, and there were a lot of like shotgun weddings, and just the whole dynamic there. Many of the wives and children, they never saw dads again. They never saw uncles again. So you can imagine, and I like the feeling of loss, but also growing up really fast because, the war. What's that buzzing?
It's the ice machine.
machine. Let me go turn it off.
If people would like to know, my silence is I have a face.
But can you hear the buzzing in the recording?
See,
I don't know. We'll find out.
It didn't buzz yesterday.
And then I guess I have a glare on my glasses.
There.
You can close it all the way. I don't care.
No, because the light.
There was a glare.
Now, the baby boomer generation was during this time in past, but they were teenagers. Life seemed pretty innocent. Like people didn't lock their doors. People went to church on Sundays. Moms were usually at home. They were, the homemakers. Prosperity was exploding across the country. That generation really boomed our prosperity here. People dressed better,
Yes.
including the criminals, which you'll see a
Right.
photograph. It was
Right.
shocking. But like any time, time period, you always have the dark side of town.
Yeah.
And so in Texarkana, it was called Little Chicago.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh. Do you know why? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it had a railroad hub that went right through, and I think that may have been what partly divided the town, if I'm not mistaken. But there was a railroad hub that brought a lot of performers. Mm-hmm. So they had famous politicians, performers, but also drifters and the criminally inclined.
oh,
would
what a
come-
term. I like it.
Yeah, just because of the railroad. And then also there was a lot of underage drinking because it wasn't monitored as well. So, a lot of the teenagers would go to bars and no one would card them or
Right.
check them.
And bootleggers.
Yeah.
In the 46?
I would think so. Yeah.
There
They
was
still have them.
one lady that
bootleg.
I read an article from. She was alive at the time when the first murder happened. And she said that she would go to Lacey's Drive-In and the tired car hop served a beer to her teenage brother and her. Yeah. And she was only 11.
Mom, do you remember going to car hops
Yep.
and having...
Were you
not
11
having beer, but...
when you had beer?
No,
But
I
they
didn't have
served
beer.
beer?
No. I went at car
Wait,
hops,
well,
so
of
they
course you-
did food.
Well, yeah.
But not alcohol.
That would
So
not
were
be-
you alive at that time?
No.
Okay, that's... She was
No.
being sarcastic.
Yeah, no. I was
Okay.
trying
No,
to-
I was for real asking.
Oh, I
no,
thought you were
if you went
kidding.
to car hops and they
no,
served beer.
no,
Yeah.
beer.
Okay.
That your time would probably be more Greece.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know when it stopped.
Yeah. Also, they had ladies of the evening.
Night stalkers.
I can't believe you said that. I still laugh
Or
about
night
that.
walkers.
You called them night walkers. I'm like,
walkers.
night walkers.
And my husband
like
knew,
night
bam,
walkers.
exactly
a
what I
lady
was talking.
of the evening.
I thought you mean prostitutes? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard
Yeah,
it
I
called a
mean-
night walker.
Yeah, no, that would be like almost like a worm, you would think.
I would thought
you know,
it was
like a
that-
night crawler.
Yeah.
You would think of like
That's what I
a
was
fishing.
thinking about.
But no, it's night ladies of the evening
But
was
maybe
what she
the
was
term
trying to
had
come up
changed,
with.
So I
Yes.
thought, oh, okay,
Sure, it
maybe
did.
it changed these terms.
Okay, so one of the first, let me see if I can bring them up. Okay, this guy right here. I could not find the lady he was with. His name is Jimmy Hollis. He was 25 at the time. And his girlfriend, Mary Jean Laurie, I think is how you pronounce it, was 19.
Look at the bow tie.
And they were parked on a secluded road, February 22nd, 1946.
Oh,
Yes. And it was known as Lover's Lane. So they
like
had
3
gone
days.
to a movie, and there wasn't much to do in, small towns. So they decided to seek out some privacy for talking. and maybe a little bit of snuggling. You just don't know.
A little nookie.
But at 11:55, a man wearing a white cloth mask with eye holes and a mouth hole cut out approached their car, shining a flashlight in their eyes, blinding them. He ordered both of them out of the car. Hollis thought that he wanted to steal his car, and it wasn't the best vehicle. So he's like, I think you might have the wrong car. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll warn you when we get to the crime scene, I believe this is the car. So, and I'll have these pictures online, but I think that is his car, but it may have been the second murder.
And he's dressed so well.
Yeah.
And
that
they
is
tie
so
those
funny.
bow ties themselves. They want the clip.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that was his, but I think it was. The suspect, he told Hollis, I don't want to kill you, fellow, so do what I say. Laurie, Mary Jean, she thought that he wanted to rob them, so she offered him Hollis's wallet. And
Sorry.
like, here, don't kill us. Here's his money.
Yeah.
But the perpetrator, he wasn't interested in either of those things. He ordered Hollis to take his pants off and pistol whipped him so hard that Mary Jean thought that he had shot him. That's how hard he hit him. So Hollis was unconscious. He then hit Mary Jean and ordered her to run. So what are you thinking about it so far?
Like hunting.
He's playing.
Sadistic. So he would probably be a sexual sadist in the definition, except I don't think the sexual part was as important to him as the sadist part.
But the pants off thing may be.
The pants off is either that or it's so the man cannot fight him or run.
Or humiliation.
Yeah.
Humiliation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the car would be humiliating, but okay.
Right. That looks pretty bad.
Hey, kudos to him. He got around.
So she takes off running and he started stomping Hollis's body with his feet.
Dang.
Then he took off after Mary Jean, who was running up the road, and she saw an old car parked off to the side, but it was empty. I think it was his.
Oh, yep.
Oh.
So the attacker pursued her, caught up with her. He wanted to know why she ran. And she's obviously like, well, you told me to. So he called her a liar and then knocked her out. He then sexually assaulted her with the barrel of his gun.
Wow.
Whoa.
So she woke up later and she fled on foot to a farmhouse and people called. Hollis also woke up and a passerby saw him and stopped to help. Hollis's pants were found 100 yards from the parked car. So I guess maybe after he got done assaulting Mary Jean, he then went and got his pants off of him and threw them. And then Hollis, he felt like the attacker was about 6 foot, a white guy, and Mary Jean thought that he was a light-skinned African American.
Okay.
Well,
Did they agree on the height?
yes.
Okay.
But that really messed things up from the start, big time. And what's sad is that the police didn't buy that it was a stranger, which we'll get into. But it really did kick things off on the wrong foot. So as far as the details of the attack so far, so definitely sadistic. What else are you picking up on?
Just the games that he played.
Yeah. Like almost like a predator playing with his prey.
Yeah, to run and...
For sure. But also that assault. That's assault with the barrel of a gun. The very first one, supposedly. I mean, we don't know, but I'm like, that's not only a very strange assault that I don't know that we've seen or heard. It's definitely rare if they're out there, but for it to be your first potential kill and assault, that's weird to
For
start
me,
off with.
He must be impotent. In that
Impotent?
Impotent.
Impotent?
Impotent. Impotent.
Well-
same thing pretty much.
Right.
I have, though, heard of some men using instruments quite often. I mean, Ted Bundy did, BTK. And so for some of them, it's actually a moral thing. Like if you
Okay.
look at BTK, he didn't want to be unfaithful to his wife, the poop bird.
Gotcha.
That he wanted to kill.
And then for some of the new ones, they will use an object because they're not quite ready for full on rape. So I think it could be either or. It could be that's something he liked and that's what he did, or it could be he was new and he wasn't quite ready, or maybe he did have some moral compass as far as rape and things. I don't know, but murder's
to be
okay.
new, because he didn't murder them yet.
Not yet.
Okay, so that makes sense to be new. Just okay. I've never.
I've seen.
I remember
that quite
Ted
a
Bundy
bit.
doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have?
Yeah. Okay. Now to me, he definitely gets off on fear and torment, which that's where the sadist part comes from. The fact that he did assault her with a gun sexually tells me sexual sadist right off the bat is what I thought. Obviously, he's going to have some criminal background as well. So I was waiting for that, because you don't just go out and start killing people. There's some type of fantasy life. There's some type of petty crime, peeping Tom, things like that somewhere in the past. In fact, that Brian Koberger that killed the Idaho students. I'm still waiting. There's a dang what's it called where they can't talk about
Gag order.
Gag order, which
gag
is
order.
frustrating because even the family's like, that's a rare thing to do. Why are you doing that?
Right.
But I'm very curious if he had some petty criminal activity. I do know that he was addicted to heroin at some point, so there was definite drug use.
I wonder if he was a little older, too.
Good question. Good question.
Wait. Are we talking about him, heroin, or the dude from Idaho?
The Brian Koberger from Idaho.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Which
But
rewires your
typically,
brain.
you do have alcohol abuse or drug abuse with these killers because it lowers their inhibition. Yeah. And gives them like liquid courage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a month later, on March 23rd, Richard L. Griffin, 29, and his girlfriend Polly Ann Moore, 17.
Wow.
Hey, that's like
Well,
you
I'm
and
not gonna-
Dad.
yeah, I know.
Or you and Steven.
Whatever.
No, not Steven.
No, she was much younger. My dad, yes,
Your
my dad
dad.
was quite young.
Yes, and then my
and
dad
Mom
would have been
was
arrested.
A cougar, right?
Yeah.
yeah. So just switched.
Yeah.
Well,
Was it-
your dad taught Mom well.
Yes. He set a good example. To, it's like is it Munchausen syndrome, or what's the syndrome where you're
I think so.
kidnapped and
That's
brainwashed
it. That's
and
it. I wasn't
all that.
brainwashed.
So maybe, you're like, hey,
Well, you were at a very formidable year in your life.
Everyone did that back then.
Did they?
60s and 70s, yeah.
But that much
More so.
older? No, it was the same age. Like they were the same age typically.
and we
He
just
was
can
only
just keep the
25
age
though.
at, okay, well, the age is there, yes.
Wait,
Because-
what did she say? Because I was being quiet.
Dad
What did
was
you say?
25.
yeah.
And
And I looked older,
and Mom was
And acted older.
15 or 14 when y'all met.
15.
Yes.
But she looked away when you said that. I'm going to guess 14, but
No,
no one's
15.
ever said anything.
15.
If
Yes.
anyone can corroborate that, please call in.
Well, that would only be me.
Okay.
Well, we can do the math. I have all the paperwork at the
When
house.
they met, that was my question.
15.
Anyway, so we have Griffin, who was 29, girlfriend was 17. They were found.
Wow, 29. I'm sorry, I
See,
totally
that
missed
wasn't like
that.
Yeah.
me and your dad, or me and your dad.
No,
they-
you and Steven.
Whatever.
Sorry, I could barely get that out.
So they were found dead in Griffin's sedan on a secluded road, also known as the Lover's Lane. A passing motorist noticed the vehicle between 8:30 and 9 a.m., and he saw two people inside. And I wasn't able to find the photos of that. Now, there's no crime scene photo, but I think this is the road. So look how secluded.
Yeah.
He must have really hated women, though.
Well,
Because Lover's Lane.
yeah, so Lover's Lane is definitely becoming a
Or
pattern.
couples.
Because at this time, they were not connecting what was happening.
Sure.
So the first crime where the victim survived, Hollis and Mary Jean, they felt because they couldn't agree on the ethnicity of the perpetrator that actually there was some estranged boyfriend. So they felt that she was not sharing with them, some boyfriend or something, and they were embarrassed, and the boyfriend attacked them and blah, blah. And they kept saying no. In fact, Hollis told the police the guy is full of rage and he's going to kill next time. And he was in the hospital a very long time. His skull was cracked in 2 places. And they tried to date afterwards, and they just couldn't stay together because it reminded each other of that attack. Because they were close.
As time went on, too, it's been proven you can have 10 people at the same situation, and all of them can have a different...
Yeah, eyewitness of the perpetrator is not accurate.
It's not accurate.
Yeah.
Or cars or just anything.
So this, what does the road tell you about the perpetrator? Because this is a secluded...
That he's
You
familiar.
have to know it.
Yes, he has to be familiar with this area. So he's definitely local, which fits in our theme, right? So definitely a local person. So when the people were passing by the car, they thought that there were 2 people inside sleeping.
Not mannequins.
Not mannequins.
Good.
Maybe that came later.
Yeah.
And when he approached the vehicle, he saw that they were both dead. The victims were last seen alive the night before with Griffin's sister and her boyfriend around 10 p.m. Okay, so with the second crime, I want to make sure I have everything. Yeah, I want to make sure I had everything correct. Okay, so police noticed that both victims were shot outside of the vehicle, then they were placed back inside.
Oh, that's
a lot of work.
sadistic.
A blanket with, blood all over it was outside. So they figured that Moore had been killed on the blanket before she was put back inside the vehicle. Griffin was slumped on his knees between the front seats. So I'm thinking they must have been bucket seats. So, back in the old day, you could put a person between both of them.
Yeah.
But there were some variations in the description as well.
I'm sorry, were they fully clothed, both of them?
So his pants pockets were inside out.
Oh.
And then Moore was placed face down on the back seat. So she had been shot on the blanket outside, which is interesting because the blanket tells me that there was an attempt to make her comfortable before he shot her. Because if he didn't, he could have just shot her out on the road. So he gets her on a blanket. Or he wanted to rape her, but she wasn't raped.
Right.
And then he shot her on the blanket.
Or they were on the blanket.
No, they were not. They were not. They were able to definitely...
Okay.
See, I go back to something with women.
Well, and then... okay, so she was not raped, but she was on her period. So they wondered if that's why she wasn't raped.
Yeah.
I bet so.
And she didn't even live there. It was really sad. She lived in a different town, and she was just there visiting. And her mom was really worried about her traveling by herself there. And
Did
then
she
ended
know
up
this
dead.
gentleman? And I use the word gentleman because he's 29 years old.
Yeah.
29.
Yeah, they were. Oh, and I do have a picture of let's see. I do have a picture of them. Maybe just him. Yeah. Yeah, so there he
definitely
is.
looked 29, perhaps
and there
older.
she is. And she looks older to me.
She does, for sure.
Yeah.
So they did date, or he was just bringing her?
They did date. They were both actually divorced.
Oh.
Yeah, they were divorced. She had already been married. It was
Probably got married at 15, Mom.
And it was silence, awkward.
It was one of those like before I go to war, let's marry deal.
Sure.
And then when he came back, things just weren't working out.
Yeah.
And then I forget where he had met her. But
How old is she there?
17, I think. Yeah. And then he was 29. So he fell in love with her immediately. And from what I can remember in the book, she was very mature for her age.
She looked
and they just hit
older.
it off.
As Mom always says, we were mature back then.
Yeah.
Much more mature
Yeah.
than they are now.
It's
And
true,
what was
though.
sad
Agreed.
is that Polly lived with a cousin in a different town. And again, she was there visiting. And so her mom didn't know she was missing. Oh. Yeah. Okay, so she was face down in the back seat. A .32 cartridge shell was found. They thought it was fired from a Colt. And then police, they now have two very similar attacks on their hands, but they're still not connecting the dots because the narrative that they were giving the public is that the first was a jealous lover deal. And so this one, you know, they're just thinking a robbery because his pants pockets were inside out.
Right.
And then, you know, obviously they're going to investigate it along those lines, not that they might have a serial killer.
Yeah.
They did post an award.
How much was it?
I don't
then?
remember. I don't
was
remember. It was in the
curious.
book. Okay, so this is every 3 weeks. So the first crime, then 3 weeks later, the second crime. We're now 3 weeks later for the third
I
crime.
wonder if he's a salesman or something. He just comes to town every 3 weeks.
So Betty Jo Booker, 15, and her friend Paul Martin, he was about 16 or 17. They were murdered. They were the next two victims. Betty played the saxophone with the band, and she had performed at a VFW club that night.
Oh, my goodness.
15.
Love it.
No, yeah, 15. And so Martin had a crush on her. And he had moved to Kilgore, Texas. And then he traveled to see her because he'd been thinking about her because they grew up together. They went to school together. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can win her over.
And how far was that? Of a
Kilgore,
commute?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It was, and his mom was worried about him traveling that far too. But back then, you know, cars, you know, they weren't as reliable. And, you know, I could see how moms be a little bit worried.
Do you have a picture of them? Mm-hmm. Okay.
But he had lived in Texarkana until he was 11. And so this had been about 5 to 6 years. They had known each other since kindergarten. It doesn't sound like they were dating yet. From what the book said and what my research told me, you know, like I said, he was definitely interested. He definitely wanted to date her, but I don't think they had anything going. She was a junior at Texas High, and she was well-liked, made really good grades. She belonged to a sorority, and she liked to dance.
I'm sorry, it's 109 miles.
Wow, so that was a long way away.
Yeah.
Now, on this picture...
He looks like a kid.
Well, yes, he was.
Tiny.
Well, let me tell you real fast. They couldn't find a later picture of him because, you know, they didn't take him a lot back then.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
I was gonna
just
say-
so people know, when you look up this case, he looks like he's about 11 or 12 because he is.
He looks
That
like
also-
the guy from Mad Magazine.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he
and
does
then
look young.
I think that was a later picture of her, which was pretty
Okay.
close. But look how old she looks.
Yes.
Like the hairdos and stuff
Yeah.
back then, they look definitely older. But anyway, so that, just so people know, because when I first saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, is she a pedophile?
Right.
You
But
know?
even how young he is, look, he has a tie, a little suit on.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah, he definitely had a crush on her. Well, he was going to pick her up from the VFW that night, and then they were going to hang out with some friends, maybe go to a late movie. But she didn't get out of the VFW until after midnight. So witnesses said that Martin picked her up around 2 a.m. And they were near the railroad tracks by Spring Lake Park. And it was a popular cruising spot for local teens. And it was also a Lover's Lane area.
He had to live there.
Yeah, so you've
For
got
sure.
the two Lover's Lane. Now you have the park,
Third
which was a
one.
Lover's Lane. So I think the guy definitely knew the area well.
How many lovers lane
I don't
does
know,
that
this little town,
have?
you know? And
My
you probably
word.
pick your choice between Arkansas or Texas.
Jeez.
Okay. So they really were just going to catch up, you know, because he had just gotten into town and he had to go back the next day. So he's,
You can do that in a parking lot. I'm just saying.
Right.
well, they were in a park though. And I remember being a teenager and going to the park and cruising and, you know, we'd feed the ducks and,
Yeah.
you know, fun stuff. So Now, her mom, though, was concerned because Betty loved her saxophone. And first of all, I'm like, why are these people letting their teenagers stay out till 2 a.m. and stuff? But again, it was a different time. But Betty always would stop in after a gig. She would drop her beloved saxophone off, and then she'd tell her mom, I'm going to do this or do that. And then her mom would tell her when to be home, or she'd tell her mom when she'd be back, or
how
whatever.
old was she?
15.
But again,
That's sort of unusual for a parent.
It's a
just
small
come back.
town.
but back in your day, did you do that?
No, I had a curfew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have been 2 or 3 in the morning.
Gotcha.
So, okay. The mom got concerned because she did not come by to drop off her saxophone. Police were called, and Martin's Ford coupe was parked with the keys still in it. So they found it at the park. But Martin's body was not found until 6:30 a.m., and it was lying by the northern edge of North Park Road, a mile away from his car.
Oh.
He had been shot 4 times, through the nose, through the
progressing.
ribs, and then in his right hand, and then through the back of his neck. So I'm going to show the crime scene
So it's progressing.
photo of him.
Well, surely they would connect it by now with just the gunshot.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear
That's
what you
why
were
I said
saying.
that. Yep. So that's him. And they thought he was sleeping at first. And then her body, I'm going to show that crime scene.
And these pictures are on the website.
She was found 5 hours later, 2 miles away in a wooded area lying behind a tree. Now look at the crime scene and tell me what you notice.
Well, she's all tidy and staged, all pretty.
She's staged.
Yeah.
Her hand is in her coat pocket.
Both
one
her
hand
hands
is
are,
yeah.
one's up there.
And so she was
Looks like her legs are crossed.
yeah.
maybe.
So it looks like she was posed for sure. And the fact that her hand is put in her pocket. So now we have a guy that we now know has attacked 3 couples on lovers' lanes. He's posing the bodies, taking time to do that. He is now
Mainly the women, though.
but he posed a second man between the seats,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
kneeling. That's weird. And so, yeah, it's interesting. And what they also found is that the victims would have 2 shots. But this one had 4. And when I read that, I immediately thought, okay, he must not have killed him with his first 2. And so he shot him again. So he's double. He doesn't shoot just one. And they're trying to figure out, okay, why? So again, she's found 5.5 hours later. Why was she so far away from the car? Did he make her run like he did the first victim? Right? So kind of wondering that.
Probably not that far, unless he's pretty young.
Well, 3.5 miles.
Yeah, that's quite a distance to run.
Yeah, I guess it is. She had been shot as well through the chest and once through the face. The same .32 Colt pistol was used in these murders, and they had both put up a fight. They also found her saxophone 6 months later under some brush nearby and still in its case. And it was at this point that everybody's like, okay, we got a serial killer. But they didn't have that term back then.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't come until, the 80s, I think, with Ted Bundy. So they had, they still didn't connect the first 2 to it. They still thought that was,
lover.
a separate thing. But these 2 murders, the town went crazy.
Wonder why they didn't, because they had bullets.
Later they
didn't kill 'em.
did, but they weren't killed. They thought it was a jealous lover. They didn't agree on the description of the perpetrator. So the press dubbed him the Phantom Killer. Some people call it the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. And because it always happened, they say with a full moonlight, but actually at the time of the crimes, there would have been very little light.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe is that why the 3 weeks?
And yes, and he would have a flashlight. He would shine it in their eyes.
To blind them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wonder if he wore the mask each time.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Probably.
No witnesses to tell.
That's a really good question. Yeah. Huh, good one. Yeah.
If
Okay.
anyone knows.
So then the final attack happened at this location. And I do not have any more crime scene photos. Those were the only two. Okay, so there was dispute
so
on whether
cute.
this was a phantom killer attack. And this is the one where I believe 100% it was a phantom killer attack. But the MO was a little bit different, but not really. And the weapon was different. So this was on May 3rd. So 3
Another
weeks.
3 weeks.
Before 9 p.m. Virgil Starks, he was a farmer and a welder, and he had on his property his shop. So his shop was on the property and then the house. And in his shop, he had like his welding materials, his farming equipment, like his shirt that he would wear when he was welding. You know, all of those things were out there, okay? And his back was bothering him. So he was in his chair listening to the radio and reading his paper. And then Mrs. Starks, her name was Katie, she was already in the other room in bed waiting for him, and she heard a noise. And from what she said later, she thought someone was out in his shop. And so she said, hey, you might want to go check it. And he had a heating pad on his back as well as he was reading. Well, then she heard a noise. Well, she hears a noise. When he didn't respond, she got up to go tell him, hey, I heard something, because he may not have heard her. And she saw that he was dead.
Wow.
Stabbed, shot.
He had been shot twice in the back of the head from the window.
And she didn't hear that?
She heard a noise, but she
But
didn't
not
know
the
it was
shots.
shots. And then the glass would have broken. And by the way, I saw the
Yeah.
glass. It was a perfect cylinder, like a hole.
Yeah.
So this guy's a good shot.
I was about to say.
Yeah, real
Ex-military?
good shot.
Wonder why he picked a house, though. I wonder if it was someone he knew.
Well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
Because that's a good question. I wanted to know too, and I had a few ideas. So we'll discuss it and see what you guys think. So then she runs to the phone to call the police, and she was shot twice in the face. One bullet passed through her nose, the other broke her jaw, and then it lunged under her ear, I think. She could hear the killer trying to get inside the house, and I think he might have actually already been inside when she saw him. So she took off running out of the house. It was pitch black. She ran across the field. Now just think, she's so bloodied, according to the book, she could barely see. And it's pitch black. She's running across the field.
That she's familiar with.
Her sister's house was right across the street. She bangs on the door. This guy's coming after her.
Yeah.
And her sister didn't answer. So then she had to run to a neighbor's house. They get her in the car. They drive her to the hospital. She did survive the attack. She later remarried, and she lived to be 84.
It's just interesting that the women have the most damage.
Yes. And then what was interesting, here's another little tidbit. So 2 Arkansas state troopers, Max Tackett, who is my favorite, and Charlie Boyd, they had spotted a parked car. So like, let me see if I can describe this and point this out. So let's pretend that this is the railroad tracks, the crossings right here. There's a car parked right by the railroad tracks. The Starks house is over here. There's like a field. The Starks house is over here. Well, there's a road that goes right across the railroad tracks.
Like a T.
That the police officers were driving down because they had to deliver their expense reports to the headquarters before 10 o'clock, or they wouldn't get reimbursed.
Oh, okay.
So they always regretted not stopping because they believe it was the killer's car, because they went right by the Starks house. So,
oh boy.
yeah, they pass the car, they see it, they pass the Starks house, they go on down, they deliver their expense reports.
Yeah.
And then they heard that there was another shooting, and they heard where it was, and they were very upset with themselves.
Trying to meet that deadline because
Yep.
that's money out of their pocket.
Yeah, and back then, I know there was a boom,
Absolutely.
but I doubt that police officers made tons of money.
Yeah.
Okay. So they, so then a flashlight was found outside the window, and fingerprints, no fingerprints were found, and they felt like the flashlight was probably left by the killer. But this time the weapon was a .22 caliber automatic rifle, not a .32 Colt pistol. So that's where everybody was like, oh no, it was a different killer, blah, blah. The MO is similar. So you have a secluded area. You have a husband and wife at home. It's dark. You've got a very good shot. And what does he do? He's after the lady. What I feel is the 2 shots were to get rid of the husband and get her out of the bedroom. I feel that he was stalking, that he was watching her. They did find footprints from the car that went straight to the Starks' house. They also found some cigarettes that were smoked by my prime suspect next to the vehicle. And so the difference in the guns did not bother me, because at this point, it's a media frenzy, right? The guy knows, everybody knows he has a .32 Colt. So you need to get rid of the weapon and get something different. Also, no one was going to Lover's Lanes. Everybody quit going to Lover's Lanes. The only people that were at Lover's Lanes were cops. So he had to switch his MO if he was going to keep killing. But what are y'all's thoughts?
I don't know. I'd have to hear more, but I think he's sort of different in a way. The gun and Lover's Lane. There's always going to be someone that's going to go. I mean, and
no,
they may not
no
listen to the news. They're young.
No one was. No, this was citywide, both sides. From the book, no one was going to Lover's Lane except for vigilantes, which we'll get to. But no, it was hot. There was no way he was going to be able to get away with it. I promise you. And we'll get into those details.
House.
And he wasn't wearing the
mask.
I don't know. It doesn't say if he was wearing the mask.
Well,
she should have.
Did she identify? Yeah.
I don't know if she. No, she did not identify him. But she wouldn't have been able to anyway, because she couldn't hardly see because of the blood and the pain. And so yeah, she was blindly running out of her house.
Yeah.
But she knew he was coming because she could hear him.
Too many differences, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, we'll get to the we'll get to the proof.
Okay.
But I was curious. So I could see how both, but to me it was similar in that it was couples, it was dark, it was 3 weeks later. The car sitting on a solitary road waiting for victims, or maybe saw the house. So to me, it sounds similar enough where I think it was probably the same person. And there is some things we can get into in the part 2.
As you were describing the scene, though, my thought was the previous are going to be in the newspaper, so you have a different killer kind of taking advantage of that 3-week mark.
They did wonder if there were copycats, and some did suggest that. But again, I got some stuff. Okay, so you guys are of the opinion it might be someone different. Okay, let's see here. Some said that there were a few bloody footprints near Stark's body, and they thought maybe the killer, walked around to look at his handiwork. But I don't think so, because there were so many police and press that walked around the crime scene that by the time the main detectives got there, they were furious because they ruined the crime scene. No one knew whose footprints it belonged to. And it's like, well, now we don't have any evidence. We don't have any way. But they also saw footprints go to the shop.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it went from the shop, so from the car to the shop to the house.
That's interesting.
So he was rummaging around in the shop.
Did Virgil have a gun?
Yeah, I was going to say,
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. That's a good question. I also feel that he got startled because he dropped his flashlight and left it alone. or left it at the crime scene. So, because he's been very methodical, and there's been no traces of his crime except for bullet cartridges.
So again, potential different one, or they start getting sloppy and messing up.
Yeah.
Sherry is quite proud. Yes.
Yes.
That's what we're seeing here.
Now, the absence of a motive as well, because when they investigated this crime, they could find no enemies of Stark's at all. They were well known. Everybody loved them.
There wasn't really motives on any of them, though, yet.
And so at first, so they believed that it was the Phantom Killer. But that changed in 1948. They started thinking maybe it was two separate things. And people to this day think it is. But like I said, I don't. They also thought the victimology was different because you've got like teenagers, young adults that were killed in the first ones. This is a couple where Virgil was 37, his wife was 36. So they're like, okay, that's a little bit different victimology. But detectives did notice several things. He attacked on weekends every 3 weeks, which makes sense if your target's lover lane teenagers, couples. He always attacked couples. He used the same gun. He wore a white cloth mask, and he did seem sexually motivated. But other than the sexual assault of the first victim, there wasn't any evidence of rape or sexual assault of the other victims.
Well, one was on her period,
Right.
though.
Right.
You know, if it was the same, it was probably someone he knew and didn't like.
But the other thing with sexual sadists is a lot of times having sex with their victims is not it. Their weapon is their instrument. So like with Son of Sam, the gun was his sexual sadist tool. There was another one where the knife was. Like they didn't care about raping or anything like that, but the sexual charge came from the act itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A psychologist at the Federal Correctional Institute in Texarkana, Dr. Anthony LaPaula, said in a 1946 interview that he felt the killer was a white man between the age of 30 to 50, quote, motivated by a strong sex drive and a sadist at the same time being a cunning planner and a clever, intelligent, shrewd, and dangerous individual of the type that often remains not apprehended.
Okay.
Also, according to the doctor, and pretty usual at the time, and in that part of the country, the good doctor didn't think the man was black because, and I apologize beforehand, I am quoting, in general, Negro criminals are not that clever.
Again, a quote.
And that's how they
And
thought
obviously
back then. That's
a
not-
bigoted
yeah.
statement,
It's a
not to
bigoted-
give criminals props, but that has nothing to do with it. So, but I just wanted to quote and warn people. Okay. Now, so that was the last crime. Okay. There was one more that might have been, which I investigated and we'll get into in part 2. But what are your thoughts so far? Anything
How
to
so?
add? Anything to add? So
No, I have nothing to add. But
No,
not
I'm eager
sure.
to see that last one.
Yeah.
How you're tying and thoughts to
Okay.
that. Yeah.
And who wrote the book?
James Presley, I believe.
Now, why is his more
Because he had all his dad's research
information?
He was a
and
things
stuff
reporter.
because he was a
His dad
reporter.
was a
That might be a
reporter.
good book for Stephen.
It's really good. Now, the panic. Okay, so women, if their husbands were out of town, they would stay at this hotel called Hotel Grimm,
What a name.
Maybe there's a street groom.
and it was located downtown. So if they went out of town, they put themselves in that hotel and they slept with the doors barricaded and no windows open.
Oh my word.
Others rigged what's called a Rube Goldberg-esque security system, and I think I have a snapshot. So this is a lady. So she's got a blanket that was nailed over the glass door next to a table that was teetered on an ashtray, which would fall over if the door was open, because some people couldn't afford to stay at a hotel. And then when the table teetered, it would also spill loose nails onto tin trays. Pots would smash against the vases on the floor, which would wake up Mr. and Mrs. Rochelle, who kept a rifle next to their bed. So
She looks a little older, though.
they all did back then.
Well, she
But-
definitely
She
does.
does.
Yeah.
This tells you how, like the headline, Texarkana Terror, Southern City is panicked by killer who shoots according to schedule. And of course the press went nuts. They caused a lot of problems. They were publishing a lot of crap that wasn't real, and it was causing the police to have to waste their time. So
it's not new.
You know, like
No,
the fake
nothing
news
new.
back then, they were just as fake. So yeah, they were trying to make it where they would be alerted. People bought guns, and then they had them on both sides of the bed, the wife
Good.
and the husband.
Good.
And then also the children would sleep in their room on pallets because blankets, you know, not pallets like wood pallets. But they would sleep with them in their room because it was such a terrible time, especially after the Starks murder. They're like, you're not safe anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's part one. So what we'll
Okay.
do is we'll pause and refresh, and then we'll dive into part
Part two.
two. Outline of a Murder is a Mr. Joseph production. What do you think, Joseph?